sales exhibition, the Ghana Independence Fair, happening on the 26th and 27th of March 2022 at MX24 Silicon Square, Boundary Road, East Legon. It'll be 2 days of sales exhibitions, workshops, pitch sessions, a food fair, and open-air concert. Get your stand now. Exhibit and benefit from a month-long exclusive promotional package for Ghanaian-owned businesses. Visit mx24online.com to register your business now. You can also call 055 0500 555 or 024 235 5956. The Ghana Independence Fair on the 26th and 27th of March. Buy Ghana to grow Ghana. If you're into content production for digital or TV, say hello to the MX24 Studios. We're the prime location for your music video shoots, live productions, TV shows, and more. From state-of-the-art equipment to a very skilled production team, we've got you covered. Step into our modern and spacious studio with a changeable lighting system and foolproof sound. Our touchscreen studio projection monitors come with other features, including Wi-Fi connection, screen mirroring, and a remote workspace mode. Take advantage of our high-quality cameras to shoot in 4K and a variety of the best lighting equipment guaranteed to put life into your sets. Locate us on the first floor of the Silicon House building off the Boundary Road, East Legon. Give us a call on 024 235 5956 or 054 454 8612. You can also email us at info@mx24gh.com.
No topic is off limits. The pain of experiencing a miscarriage is something that can crumple your world. We're talking postpartum bodies and everything in between. And they share their story on their battle with infertility. The touching stories of the African woman rolls before you.
I was disappointed in God, in life, in myself.
How many losses have you had?
After that, we had 4 more.
What?
I shouted, I said,
we lost vision, we lost any sound beyond crying.
Our mistakes, advices, regrets, real stories, and more on We Got This Africa. Na Ashako and her intriguing panel serve you real experiences of the African woman. We Got This Africa.
We got this.
Good evening and welcome to Spotlight on MX24 television. My name is Nuong Falong. This month of March at MX24, we're celebrating Ghana Month, and we invite you to join us, join our programs, watch us every single day and experience Ghana with us. The hashtag on social media is Ghana Month on MX24, also hashtag ExperienceGH, and Buy Ghana to grow Ghana. Every single day we'll have interesting programs that will delight you and showcase the rich Ghanaian culture. Please stay with us throughout the month of March. Today on Spotlight, we're looking at Ghana's industrialization policy and the impact it's had on the sectors that matter. Now, the Ghana Industrial Policy was developed to provide a clear and transparent guideline for the implementation of government's industrial development agenda, with focus on the growth, diversification, upgrading and competitiveness of Ghana's manufacturing industry. Has it had the relevant impact? I'm going to be speaking this evening with Patrick Stevenson, who is a policy analyst, also with Dr. Williams Prepra, who is head of finance at Valley View University, and Dr. Daniel Enim, who's an economist. There are no better people to speak to the issues than the people who have the knowledge in them. We'll be right back after this break. Stay with us.
March is here, and on MX24, it's GH Month. As part of the month-long activities to celebrate exceptional Ghanaian products and services, we're organizing a 2-day pop-up shop and sales exhibition, the Ghana Independence Fair, happening on the 26th and 27th of March 2022 at MX24, Silicon Square, Boundary Road, East Legon. It'll be 2 days of sales exhibitions, workshops, pitch sessions, a food fair, and open-air concert. Get your stand now. Exhibit and benefit from a month-long exclusive promotional package for Ghanaian-owned businesses. Visit mx24online.com to register your business now. You can also call 055 0500 555 or 024 235 5956. The Ghana Independence Fair on the 26th and 27th of March. Buy Ghana to grow Ghana.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I mentioned before we went on that break, we're discussing government's industrialization agenda and the impact it's had on various sectors of the economy. Now, we know the trade minister recently gave a speech and spoke about the number of factories that have been established by government, especially since the One District, One Factory initiative was introduced. This is an initiative that was introduced by the present NPP government in the industrialization drive. Before that, there have been other initiatives by different governments. But let's focus on this and take a quick listen to that and come back to the discussion.
Government of Ghana, through the Ministry of Trade and Industry, has facilitated the setting up of a total of 278 companies and projects across the 16 regions of our country. Out of this number, 106 companies are currently in operation. 148 are under construction and 24 are at the mobilization stage. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that the 1D1F initiative is private sector led but facilitated by government. The role of government includes payment of interest subsidy on loans that are granted to 1D1F companies by participating financial institutions, the granting of incentives such as waiver of import duties on capital goods and raw materials, and facilitation of access to infrastructure facilities such as electricity, water, and roads. Mr. Speaker, since the start of the program, government has successfully mobilized loans for 1D1F companies from the PFIs totaling an amount of 2.6 billion Ghana cedis. This amount has been leveraged through the disbursement of an amount of 260.9 million Ghana cedis by government as subsidy to de-risk loans and support interest payment for the beneficiary 1D1F companies.
And that was Minister of Trade and Industry, Alan Kojo Chirimantin, giving his address there. That's an interesting number over there. We have been trying to get the full list of these factories that have been mentioned, and as soon as we get a hold of them, we will feed them to you. In the meantime, let me go to Dr. Williams Pepra, Head of Finance at Valley View, Dr. Daniel Enim, who is an economist, and Patrick Stevenson, a policy analyst. Gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Spotlight. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Right. Let me quickly check in
Good evening.
With Patrick. I don't know if you listened to the Trade Minister's address just now. Right. Let me go to Dr. Williams Pepra. My apologies. We have issues with the line there for Patrick, but we're going to try to get a hold of him. Dr. Pepra.
Yes.
You just listened to the same address that I listened to. What is your view of how government has gone about their entire industrialization agenda?
Thank you very much for calling me, and good evening to your viewers.
Good evening. Thank you.
If we just taking some notes from what the minister read, really give an indication that government itself was not the one going to construct
these
the
factories.
factories.
Yes.
But government was going to facilitate in terms of giving financial assistance, tax rebates, or tax clearance to private individuals or institutions to go into this process of industrialization. So what it means is that individuals were supposed to come out with their own
initiatives
within the districts.
Okay.
And when they're able to do that, government will come
and support.
You submit your plans to the ministry.
Okay, we're having some issues with the line there. We sincerely apologize, but while Dr. Pipre's line is giving us issues there, let me go to Dr. Daniel Nim. Hopefully we have better luck with that line. Dr. Nim.
Hello.
Yes, if you can just take up from where Dr. Pipre left off. He was talking about individuals coming up with their own initiatives within the district, submitting it to the ministry, and then the ministry seeing the feasibility and how government can support. Is it the same way you also see it?
Yes, thank you very much. Even before I address the question, in the manifesto by then, in the MPP's manifesto, when this D1F was communicated, the understanding then was that the government is going to construct the factories on its own.
True.
I think, but thereafter we got to know that it's about just supporting the private sector to construct such industries. Now, it takes time for the private sector to respond to policy. More importantly, when it comes to a very critical sector like the manufacturing sector, number one, it is capital intensive, and they need to satisfy themselves that this factory will be beneficial not only in terms of employment, but the return on their investment. And as a result of that, there has been quite of slow pace in delivering that mandate. And that's the reason which we've not seen much of factories as propagated by the government, so to speak. Now, these are some of the challenges. So my summation then was because it will take time for the private sector to buy into the policy, find out the feasibility of these factories. I was of the view then, and I advised on normal platform, that government should consider expanding existing factories. Once you do that, then the 1D1F will become a medium to long-term project. So as it stands now, we've seen a couple of number of 1D1F factories on the ground, but it wasn't as expected. And the reason basically is the private sector is taking them time. Government do not have the funding. Of course, even the funding that the government promised, government couldn't raise sufficient funding to be able to support some of these ideas, some of these ideas. So these are some of the issues on the ground. In terms of funding, it's a huge issue. I have written extensively on this 1D1F, which is a policy that I have supported. And I've received a call from a couple of people telling me, but I told them, look, I'm not in government. I can only express my view as an analyst. And the challenge that so many people have innovative ideas, but the funding has been the issue. And to be able to roll out 1D1F, just like government have said, government should be in a better position to raise a very competitive funding options for the businesses in terms of the rate and in terms of the ease of accessing the funds, which has not been so. And so that's the reason which we've not seen so much of 1D1F. And if you recall, in recent time, government has not been trumpeting so much about 1D1F, just like the beginning of His Excellency Nanado's leadership, principally because things were not as they envisage in terms of the funding options and in terms of private sector coming on board aggressively. So
Dr. Nim,
that has not been done.
You see, you're saying that it takes a while for the private sector to respond to policy. but it's been a while. It's been at least 5 years. Why is it taking so much time for them to respond? Should there be some kind of stimulation that encourages them to be more responsive to this policy?
Yes, if you recall, government promised to support, and that was the angle that Dr. William Quist was coming from, which that is the case. Government intends supporting them, but government in itself is facing liquidity challenges, and that support was not forthcoming as expected. So it could be one of the factors for which we've not seen so much of this 1D and 1F on the ground. Secondly, if you want to promote local industrialization, manufacturing, you need to look at certain policies which will be beneficial to local industries. As we speak now, the cost of production is quite high. That is the cost of power, utilities, so to speak, power, water, that is electricity and water in producing is an issue. Secondly, the competition from other economies, more importantly from China. So if I am producing X product here and a businessman can get the same thing cheaper from China, and you don't have any policy of ensuring that you are protecting my space as a local producer, I'll find it difficult to move into that space. You'll see a lot of people still doing commerce, buying from China, buying from Turkey and other economies with all the freight charges and then the taxes. It's still more competitive in terms of our local production. So we need to do more in terms of policy to be able to induce the private sector to aggressively accept 1D, 1F as a policy. Though we have some few factors on the ground, but I'm of the view that if we look at protecting that market, that space, and we minimize the keen competition from other economies like China, as indicated earlier, then I'm of the view that will be quite a good motivation for the private sector, aside the funding, to be able to roll out the 1D, 1F as expected.
Interesting. Dr. Enim, let me check with Patrick Stevenson if he thinks the same. Because if I'm hearing you correctly, it takes time for the private sector to respond to policy, and that is probably why we've seen a slowness in the response to one district, one factory. You're also giving us a bit of an idea of exactly how to bring them on board more easily. But Patrick, we're just taking a look at why there's been a slow response from the private sector to the promotion of one district, one factory. Clearly, the results have not been as government envisaged or sold to the public. Dr. Enim also made it clear that in the beginning, we listened to the trade minister who was talking about some 120-something factories that have been on the ground so far. We don't have a list of them yet, and when we do, we will share. But what has been the reason why there's so much slowness in the private sector catching on? Because the trade minister mentioned that the role of government is to support the initiatives that the private sector will bring on board for one district, one factory. So why is the private sector, are they not bringing on the initiatives? Are they not eager to do business? What's going on?
Well, thank you very much, Nuon. I think this is a very timely conversation, for the country to have. Not only because, industrialization is important, but I think if you look across, the world, there's a major conversation around how countries and economies can be self-sustaining. And part of that strategy is being able to do things locally, right, to empower your people locally and intentionally build an export diversification portfolio. And you can't do that if you don't have, the sufficient and requisite, local manufacturing capacity. You can't do that without a properly defined industrialization drive. I will possibly maybe differ a little bit, fundamentally, because I think from the get-go, when the policy was launched, I think we were made to understand there were a number of round shows and policy engagements that the minister responsible for trade and industry, business development as well at the time, and the current minister for information, collectively, did respond to the people of this country and indicated an oversubscription of 1D, 1F, by several entrepreneurs and businessmen in the country. And we were made to understand that a lot of the projects, were still being evaluated. They were engaging different financiers. that we're going to, as it were, work with government, towards rationalizing the proposals that have come through. So I wouldn't, if you look at the entrepreneurial energy as well in the country, I will find it strange that it's a case, that entrepreneurs, businessmen just don't want to take advantage of a government's policy. And again, maybe the evidence points in another direction, but if the reports from government is anything to go by, people, had expressed interest, proposals has come through, but again, putting together a proposal does not necessarily mean that it's going to be something that's feasible, for which reason the government is going to support and bankroll you, for that kind of activity. And so that's where I would want to look at this from. And that means a number of things. One, you could still have existential risks. Because to the extent that the government itself, after 5 years, has managed to get some of the companies are going, bear in mind, if they said one district, one factory, it means, people usually put that number a little over 260 factories, right? Considering that you're going to have a factory in every district. Well, government's numbers do suggest that 260 has been met after 5 years. And people knew that, realistically, if you're a private sector, it's not going to work. Because the economic profile of our districts are all different. And so you got to a point where some existing factories needed to be revamped, some needed to be retooled, some needed to be re-strategized. And they've done all of that. And so, when you consider that and the fact that the numbers have not been met, and you're trying to find out why that's not happened, I will argue that, there are existential risks in the economy today. And these existential risks practically make it impossible, whether the business is on the side of the government or is on the side of the private sector, or even if it's a joint collaboration between government and public sector, and the private sector, as we have seen under 1D1F, that these risks don't care whether it's private or public. They don't care about the strategy. You've got to deal with the risks. If you don't deal with that, really are not getting anywhere. Cost of credit is still relatively high as we speak today. So if I build a project and that project is supposed to be financed under 1D1F, and an interest rate of about 25% does not make it viable. It's not viable. There's nothing you can do about it, which is why a lot of the initiatives appear to be sitting in the agro-processing industry, which is fine in and of itself, but it's got to be connected to the export strategy of the country. And some we have gotten right, but others as well are in value chains that still have existential risks, right? So I think that is because of these risks that we haven't seen, these things materialize the way that government was looking out for them. Bear in mind as well that 1D1F was just a broad strategy that was supposed to help unlock finance in a much quicker process for private sector people who want to do business. At least that's how we understood it from the government's point of view. Well, if these risks did not exist in the economy broadly, we wouldn't need government. Banks will finance businesses that are de-risked. Banks are, finance institutions exist primarily because they want to explore opportunities. So to the extent that the opportunity is there, it's not risky, banks will go for it. The reason you need government intervention is because it's possibly risky, and, the government has to de-risk, these investments for a private sector to be able to bankroll them, and in some cases help connect finance as well. So I would say that's the reason we haven't seen deployment at the scale. And we should also acknowledge that some of it has been done. It's just not been done the way we expect it to be done. And it's not been done in a manner that necessarily changes the manufacturing mix of the country. Because again, if you look at manufacturing sector productivity as we speak today, yes, it's improved marginally over time. But compared to the buzz that we saw around, one district, one factory as a strategy that was supposed to change, the industrial landscape of the country, I'm not sure we've had that, which means that there's a lot more work that we ought to do.
Right. I see. I think you're echoing similar sentiments as Dr. Enim, because he was also saying something in relation to that. So it seems like it's more about the business environment and improving the business environment so that it's friendly for the private sector to venture into this area.
Pretty much the case, and again, we've had this business of the business environment needing to be improved for a very long time. I know a number of reforms that was started even by governments under the before regime, the Presidential Special Initiative and PSI, what you call it, the President's Special Initiative in Industrialization or something like that. started some of these activities that we're seeing today, right? And I know a number of reforms, even under this current government, when we set up the ministry that was responsible for a business, and some collaborations between the trade ministry and even that ministry, and then the private sector development secretariat, which was morphed into the business development ministry. It's the same thinking. What can we do to make business registration easy? What can we do to make access to credit relatively easy to businesses? And I would argue that we've had quite a number of opportunities to do these things. If you think about access to credit, for example, and I know what I'm going to say is possibly going to be very controversial. Ghanaians may not like it, but somebody has got to say it. I mean, it cost us something in the region of 840 million Ghana cedis, according to budgets, right? I'm not looking at actual allocations to pay compensation for NACO employees, right? Well, you know what 840 million is? In 4 years, you're talking something that's going to about 3.2 billion. Well, 3.2 billion in the hand of government at close to 0% interest rate. You know the number of businesses you could have likely produced, even if you assume that the 30% of the NAPCO beneficiaries even managed to come up with small-scale businesses to support the economy. 30%. That's about 30,000 people who may have gotten off payroll. I won't be crying today. It is controversial, but somebody's got to say it, right? So those are pockets of opportunity that we got to de-risk, if you like, and improve the business environment. We've seen a lot of these electronic and digitalization initiatives all geared towards making that happen. But at the end of the day, if you look at the AGI reports, they are quite clear. The risks that confront businesses today will be cost of electricity, which is at the roof. If you take a look at the Ghana Statistical Services report, you will know that, for the first time since this government came into power, the non-food basket prices have gone, higher than you have for the food basket. So that clearly shows an existential threat to businesses. You've seen prices of fuel go up. You've seen interest rate. I mean, I know the president has talked consistently about that, how we can get the banks to reduce the cost of credit. We had a reform around monetary policy. All of these things were geared towards supporting that. We should equally take COVID into account, for example, right? So there's still a lot that we need to do in that regard.
That's a mouthful, Patrick, but let me see if Dr. Nim wants to react to any of that. Dr. Nim, are you still on with us?
Yes.
Yes. Listening to Patrick.
Yes. Patrick looked at the risk aspect of the whole equation, which is critical. Just like I indicated, before any business person, any private person who accept any policy of government, you need to consider the risks, just like you discussed. You look at the options in terms of availability of financial resources, whether the banks will give you a facility at a competitive rate, which I'm sorry to announce that we all know that our banks, the interest rate is high. Secondly, you need to have an environment, a policy that will ensure that whatever it's produced here locally, you get a market for it, number one. Secondly, you need to protect, you have a way, by way of policy, quite difficult though, because of the modern economy and the dynamics and the interference of other powerful countries that, try to support their nationals to flood developing markets. So, but of course, you need to come out with a policy, a clear policy to protect your local industry. Just as indicated, if I am producing here, I have borrowed at a very high cost, which is the risk aspect that Patrick spoke about. Then the second aspect, I produce and I'm having a keen competition from another business person who is not producing, but he is importing from China at a very low cost, and he's selling at a very competitive price. What it means that I will not be in a better position to sell whatever my products, and that will affect my ability to pay for the cost of capital and also the return on my investment. So any entrepreneur, any business person will look at the cost of capital, at what rate am I borrowing to invest. The second aspect I have to do the return on my investment. And the third is about the macroeconomic environment, the ability of the macroeconomic environment to support whatever I'm producing in terms of getting, in terms of demand, in terms of the price. And you also have to look at competition. Where is the competition coming from? Do we have a policy to protect me in a way? We do not have all these policies on the ground, and that's the reason which. So let me remind all of us, when this 1D1F was announced, I recall vividly that a lot of people expressed interest, including international businesses and investors, as well as diplomats here went to the ministry, expressed optimism that, oh, their government and their business people will be investing in this country. But of course, no businessman will just rush into your economy just because you have announced 1D1F. They will consider all these issues we're considering: the risk aspect, the cost of capital, return on his investment, and policy to protect his investment. One of the things that we have here, to me, have to do with, we have a very stable political environment. We have a very fairly stable, very sound judicial system that will protect businesses. But these are other issues that are very critical that a businessman will immediately consider. And if that is not on the ground, that may not motivate a business person to accept that policy and move on with the policy. Initially, when this thing was communicated as a way of a manifesto document, I happened to be on the panel when the manifesto was launched that very day. And as I indicated earlier, the understanding was that government is coming in strongly to support in terms of funding or liquidity. As it stands now, the narratives have changed, and people are actually interested to do something at the macro level, just like Patrick indicated. But the funding is not the issue. I have a couple of, just I indicated earlier, people called me after my article on 1D and 1F, critical vehicle for stimulating economic growth. People called, including one professor from Tech, who has the ability of converting coconut husk into chemicals that these miners use. But the funding, he followed through the process and they couldn't access it. And he is asking if I know anything, if I could help. But the point I'm driving is that until we make the macroeconomic environment attractive, conducive to support local businesses, government policy may be very good, but no business person, no private person will be able to run with their policy. So it's one thing having a good policy on paper, and another thing is realistically looking at your macroeconomic environment, looking at your policy, which will actually support the private sector to run with the policy. If you don't have that in your development equation, in your investment equation, or in your manufacturing equation as a government, I'm afraid you'll not be able to attract people to support that particular agenda. And that is what exactly is happening on the ground.
Wow. So we're seeing that the environment is consistently not friendly. It's interesting that you also mentioned the stable political environment, which has been one of our biggest bragging points for a very long time. But beyond a stable political environment, what else? What else is there to support it and to protect people's investments? I'm going to go to Dr. Pepra. Hopefully his line is more stable now. But I also just want to take a few figures. Well, 1 second, please. Because when you look at the policy from 2017, there seemed to be a higher growth rate in the manufacturing sector. For some reason, in 2017, there was an impressive growth of 9.5%. But since then, there's been an interesting decline. Because in 2016 it was 7.9. So 2017 was actually an uptick. And then the value of Ghana's machinery imports increased fourfold between 2000 and 2017. So it increased to $670 million US, which was supposed to be, according to the African Development Bank, a reflection of Ghana's growing industrial capacity. Unfortunately, there's been a decline. Since then, 2021 to 2023, we see there's been a 5.1%. It's dropped to 5.1%. 2021, 2022, there's a bit of projection here for 2022 and 2023, but it's expected to stay at 5.1. So there's been a decline from 2020 to 2021 and 2022. I'm sure there can be a few excuses for that. COVID has been a consistent explanation in different economies for different reasons. But Dr. Pepra, why do we seem to be recording a decline in Ghana's appetite for industrialization?
Thank you very much. For me, I before coming to academia, I was into manufacturing for almost 8 years. I had
Have you
one
stopped
experience.
Completely?
Yes, a very switch. So in 2016, I moved into academia. I was managing a company called Masili Ghana Limited, opposite Tamawe Refinery. So the French company, exchange rate situations forced us to let them exit the country. And this still exists. One of the reasons why we have seen Ghana as a country not being able to push up our industrialization agenda is investors looking at devaluation of their investment in Ghana. See, and when anytime businesses want to establish an industry here, the GIPC law will require you to bring almost $200,000 into the country.
$1 million cedis.
$1,000 you have to pay at GIPC. Just show evidence that before they will allow you. And that amount of money you may have to deposit it in a Ghanaian bank. And probably most of them use it as equity. So, time immemorial, we have noticed that our currency has been devaluing. So, any foreign investor who focuses on industrialization or to come and help us in industry, and noticing that inflation is also affecting us as a country, things that going into industry in Ghana will not help us. Rather, they prefer to focus on buying and selling. They import, they sell, they get their money quick, and they leave the country. So this is one of the major reasons why we have seen our industry not growing, because if you're an investor, you invest in $1 million or 2.5 million in assets, and you bring it into a country and your currency is devaluing, you will see that the investors will not be able to move into industrialization. So this is, for me, this is one of the main reasons. In terms of raw materials, Ghana, we don't lack. Also, our ports are a little bit efficient, though there are a lot of issues, but within maximum 14 days, you can get your things from the port. In some cases, 5 days, if your agent is able to work very fast. So our industry is really suffering because of exchange rate. I have countless occasions where I have brought in investors, one from even Nigeria, set up in Free Zone Enclave, and they are now exiting the country. It's a big company in Nigeria, Prima Preforms, which produces Lacasera. They just stopped production because of the issue of exchange rate and stuff. And they won't even sell their facility and exit. So this is they only look at the end of the day, if you do your group report and you convert your city turnover into any foreign currency, you will see that it's insignificant. And you ask yourself as an investor into industrialization in Ghana, does it worth it? For us Ghanaians also, as has been mentioned, because we also lack the capital to go into industrialization, we are limited. Probably this government agenda of 1D, 1F, we should have focused on some specific products. But we were only looking at location. That is, to me, that is the mix. We were only looking at location, but as a country, we did not look at what product are we going to produce from each location. And this is one of the reasons why we are struggling to get these factories established. Because you may think of the raw material input and also the labor aspect. As an academic, I also see a disconnection between the labor force and the industries you are trying to establish. Do you know that it's very difficult to get qualified electricians in Ghana, even up to a degree level? Even our technical universities now are struggling to graduate or give us good technicians to handle most of the industry. So even if we are able to establish 1 or 2 industries in the country, we are going to suffer the manpower, the technical people to handle these issues. So it's very, very dicey as a country, and that is why we see that our industrialization agenda has been very slow. Going back into Nkrumah's time,
sorry, Dr. Pipra, is it because we have failed to plan strategically for it? Because when you decide to embark on an industrialization agenda, you should have had a phase where you have prepared for it. Like you're mentioning, one of the shortfalls is the manpower. You go ahead and then you make, an establishment, but there's a shortfall there where you don't have manpower to run it. So maybe there should have been a phase where we focus on technical education, improve upon the skills of people needed for these critical industries before we move into industrialization. I also want to find out why we seem to be in a cycle here, because you mentioned that businesses are struggling with the cedi depreciation, which literally rubbishes their revenue at the end of the year, because converting it into any foreign currency, you begin to realize that the margin of your profit is not encouraging. But we also see a situation where it is only through industrialization, mainly, that you can improve upon the gross domestic product within the country, which will affect the cedi's strength ultimately. So how do we tackle it? Because if we go one way, then we are still affecting the cedi, and if we embrace what we are running away from, is the only way to improve the value of the cedi. But the same value of the cedi is driving people out. How?
So strategically, Ghana is known for two main products, cocoa and gold. So this agenda of industrialization should be around cocoa and gold. And now we can even add oil. Or let me put it in a bigger perspective.
So the key raw materials we are producing.
Yes, and then the extractive sector. If we say we are setting up industries here in Ghana around these availability of raw materials, we can add value. But as we speak, cocoa processing company is struggling to get money to buy seedlings, but we prefer to send the seedlings to other country, and all because we have already sold it in advance, collected the money or whatever as a country, because we are in need of money. So if we can have our industrialization agenda around cocoa, gold, diamond, the bauxite, the extractive sectors that we have, we can gradually turn around it. Just imagine, one cocoa syndication by a cocoa board brings in about $1.8 billion. So assuming that out of the cocoa production of, say, 700 metric tons, we are able to add value to, say, 200 metric tons, and we still go for this syndication, we'll be getting close to 3 billion. But that is how to go about the industry. And already we will not struggle having the manpower when it comes to cocoa. There are a lot of technical people, experts in academia, in industry, who are now focusing on that. When it comes to the extractive industry, if Ghana, we cannot establish these refineries to convert them into gold and the rest, can we partner? And then we make sure that these 1D, 1S activities happen in Takwa, the western regions where we have these extractive activities. Then gradually, it will propel, because the sale of this product will bring in a lot of foreign exchange to the country. And this is going to make sure that our cedi will not devalue. After that, then we will go and look at the cashew and the other product that we want to do, the shea nut, the shea butter, the mango factories, that these 1D, 1F is trying to support. You see, we did the pineapple one, the first one at Akofi. And the story is not very good to tell now. But if we have done it around cocoa, already every year in, year
excess already.
the raw material is there. But the pineapple, we spent money, we gave the funding to them, they cleared the land, but you cannot even find the product on the market to buy. So to me, that is where I think that our industrialization agenda should hover around what we can do best. In business, you focus on your core competence. Ghana, we are known for gold or the extractive industry, and then cocoa. Can we build our industrialization agenda around that? And in that case, we will be good.
Focusing on our core competence, which you're saying so far we seem not to have followed properly. But there's always a chance to go back to the table. But let me take this to Patrick. Do you think we need to go back to the table and relook at the approach to industrialization, perhaps adopt some of these suggestions, especially building it around the raw materials that are readily available, which we don't need to look for? Is this a way to approach it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a good old Akans who say Sankofa, right? So, I mean, if something is not working and you have to go back and sort of re-examine some of those strategies, I think it's important too. But a number of quick comments on this. I think from the outset of your question to Dr. Williams, you made reference to some of the things regarding the gross capital formation of the country. And I should say that, I mean, yeah, it's a good measure of, the commitment of the country towards, building its manufacturing capacity. But in the last, maybe since like 2006, if I'm right, our gross capital formation has not gone up in any significant shape or form. So yes, you may have a bump in a particular year, but there's no indication that you're actually accumulating capital for the purposes of, industrial development. So we have to put that as context. Regarding, whether or not, some of these value chains are value chains that the government considered, I'm quite, I mean, if you looked at the brief of 1D1F, for example, I think they tried to identify 12 different value chains where they were going to support the industrial capacity of the country for companies that are going to set up doing things in those value chains. Pineapple, I know, was one which ended up producing a confit. We had things in cotton, cashew, and then a whole lot of other examples that you've mentioned. And these are all, if you like, cash crops that, to some extent, sit within the immediate basket of exports of the country. So the point we have to note is that we were building that industrialization strategy for two purposes. One, export substitution or import substitution, sorry, and then two, for domestic consumption. When we decide, for example, to process some of these up to the tertiary level, we run into two fundamental problems. One is not only solving the supply side, we're going to have to deal with the complexity of the demand side. A typical example, I think Dr. Kwesi, text, whatever, right? And then we're producing cocoa. In fact, we're using the light crop to support, the processing of the product locally. Having done that, now the product is available to be consumed. People are not buying. So the government now decides to use school feeding program and others to try to shift the taste and preferences of consumers so they can buy and consume local product. So the point I'm putting this in context is just that it's not that simple. I mean, policy can get very, very complicated very quickly, particularly when you're thinking about building industrial capacity and replacing these import substitution mechanisms, some of which we're suggesting now. But I suspect the point that has been made is that it is easy for us as a country to find the very quick wins or the easy wins where we can get, some industrial capacity out of that can generate some immediate value for us. And when I look at the companies that have been set up, the profile of the companies that have been set up under 1D1F, I find some of those parallels in that. The only challenge, that I keep coming back to is that you're going to, as a company that's been supported under 1D1F, one day come and compete with the Nestle's of this world. A confit will come and compete in the same marketplace with the Nestle's of this world, the Cadbury's of this world. It will be competing with the Casablancas of this world in the same business environment. That could be very problematic very quickly. If you're thinking of an export market, if you take a confit, for example, and the production is not for domestic consumption. There's a lot of domestic consumption, yes. But if you start thinking export market, you're thinking phytosanitary and sanitary conditions that's coming from, say, the European Union, for example. And yes, we may have things like agreements with the European Union or AGOA with the US and some other countries that you may want to explore under the context of AFTA, for example, even in Africa, to move some of these goods to these other markets. But to meet some of those thresholds, it's very complicated for a local business person that has even been supported by government under 1D1F. So you require additional efforts, additional support, all of which, to my mind, comes back to de-risking the space within which they work in. So if it's meeting sanitary and phytosanitary conditions, for example, for any of these local companies, so they're going to export to designated markets, well, guess what? You've got to de-risk that. It means that you're providing additional capacity building to these companies. And I know, we have multilateral development institutions and bilateral partners of the country rather than end up supporting our local businesses to do these things. GIZ, I know, is quite big in that space. Why should that be the case? I mean, this is where I may agree, with Dr. Kwesi, for example, and I suspect Dr. Ian as well, who may have talked about, the support systems that we have to provide to the value chains we identify as value chains we want to build competitive advantage and competitive strategy in. We've had after now, and coincidentally for us, after sits in this country, right, the Secretariat. And the reason for which that's happened, I think the stars have aligned for us. It should be possible for us to conduct a very comprehensive, industry assessment for at least 20 to 30 value chains and determine which value chains we are going to provide additional support systems, not just on the supply side, but the entire process by which they get out of the country. It will involve localization of the agreements we have in Africa, for example. So yes, Sankofa, go back and look at what's worked for you or what your competitive strategies in. It's fine. My only point of difference regarding the heavy sectors is that the reason for which we talk about industrialization and building industrial capacity is not for industry themselves. It is because we want to create sustainable jobs. I think we shouldn't forget about that. And so when we've done these sorts of initiatives under 1D1F, I think there's been very important caveats because we don't only support them with finance as a country. Beyond finance, you're seeing things like tax rebates that are given to some of these businesses. In the free zones area, for example, some of them don't have to pay taxes for up to about, a decade of operating. Well, the catch for the country is that these companies they've got to improve the export profile of the economy. Beyond export profile, create sustainable jobs. So if you end up with an export strategy or an industrialization strategy that is tilted in any way towards your heavy industrial sectors, if you're not careful, you end up with an employment stunted growth of the economy. So the economy will grow fine, but it won't grow commensurate with the number of jobs you're looking for. So typically when you think industrialization strategy, you're thinking about strategies and value chains that grow with employment generation in mind, right? And when I think about that, I mean, I will run away, if I'm talking to anybody in government, I'll run away from the heavy sectors, your upstream sector, and I'll think more about the value chains that are forward and backward linkages, with existing traditional value chains in agriculture or, in the service-based industry. And when we do that, we will generally be reverting back to the mean, which we have always known, which sits in what we can do in adding value to the goods and services, to the goods that we're producing, particularly in our industrial and agricultural value chain. That's where the manufacturing and industrial capacity will sit. We're not built to produce any of these sophisticated technological developments that exist in other markets. No, we're not. A lot of the things we're importing into the country are just value adds from other end product of agro processes in other jurisdictions. So I think it's part of the things we should actively be thinking about. But Sankofa definitely something I would support, depending on which ones we're going back to pick and the strategies we're putting around that.
Patrick, it seems like there's a lot of things to fix before we can get to where we're trying to get to. So my question is there any feasibility in sight when you look at it? Is there a future for Ghana's industrialization drive?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to fix. Policy is hard. Policy is hard stuff, right? I don't think we'll be having this conversation if the policy is not hard.
Sorry, so, if you can just, apologies for interrupting, but if you can just wrap up in 1 minute, that would be great.
Yes. No, so I'm saying that policy is hard stuff, right? And so definitely there's a lot of things to fix. I don't think I don't think the answer will be, okay, well, a lot of things have not worked, so throw the baby away with hot water. No, I think the point is find out what hasn't worked, how you can make it and fine-tune it better. And I think that in the last hour or so, we've had the opportunity to unpack some of that and how we can relook possible, even if it means readjusting some of the things we're doing in the 1G1F. Maybe do that and bring them into times where they may not only support the export strategy in the country, but help us create sustainable jobs we're looking for.
Right.
One, we talked about risk. We've talked about identifying value chains that will add value to the economy quickly. We've talked about finance and how that can be de-risked for actors we have within the economy. We've talked about some things that concern regulation, which may not necessarily be about 1T1F,
right,
but purely the way we're doing business in the economy.
Thank you so much. Let me go to Dr. Enim. Let him just wrap it up for me in 1 minute, and I'll do the same with Dr. Pipra. My apologies, gentlemen, we're running out of time. The same question for you. Is there a future for Ghana's manufacturing industry?
There should. We should be able to to create that future. Yeah, we have to create that future.
Okay. The line there is giving us issues, so I'm just going to go to Dr. Pipra, who is also still on the line. Please.
The narrative. What I'm saying is that we need to create that future ourselves, and we need to have that determination, that desire to create that manufacturing hub for ourselves.
Right.
As it stands now, where I see it, what I've recognized is that most of the political architects and people who support political system are predominantly people who are into comments, buying from other economies. So there's a deliberate way, a system of protecting them, and that's the reason which deliberately we are not taking our destiny into our own hands and do the needful by aggressively pursuing policies with the propensity of changing the narrative. That is how I see it. So until we say, look, until we look at the bigger picture, we consider the future of this nation and then the citizens. Until then, the narrative will still be the same.
Thank you, Dr. Enim. Dr. Pipra, 1 minute, please. Just tell us your last remarks.
I mean, for me, there is still hope. Once you're able to connect our industry agenda with our major raw materials, and then also be able to link our academics that we are producing in the country to industry, this will be my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pipra. And if you've been listening to these gentlemen, the conclusion is very similar. We need to find TH with MX24. And good evening.
Hey guys, it's yet another wonderful Tuesday evening, and it's that time again. This is your favorite tech show right here on MX24 Tech. Today, you know the name, I'm Eddie Kumsin, your host, and I can't wait to take you through what I have for you today. Today on the show, we are going to look at the latest and the trending and top social media networks, the evolution of digital audio, the numbers, the stats, and the data, and all that it means for our digital economy, and also for our creators, social media marketers, and the entire digital landscape and ecosystem of Ghana in 2022. And for everyone that depends on that for your business and for your social life. Before we go into all that, let's go for this quick commercial break and we'll be right back.
If you're into content production for digital or TV, say hello to the MX24 Studios. We're the prime location for your music video shoots, live productions, TV shows, and more. From state-of-the-art equipment to a very skilled production team, we've got you covered.